best rogue decks in Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Today, big dogs, not only will I be updating you on the previous rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies, as well as some ones you requested, we'll also be talking about some of the strategies that were introduced in Battles of Legends Monsters Mayhem. There were some things that I was 100% wrong about, and there are some things that are starting to become really scary. And as always, big dog, if you want to keep on top with the best rogue strategies, then TheCaliEffect.com got you. This match, I only bring it out when dinos get more support. And also, to say that I was wrong about dinos on the last tier list, we'll talk about that. But as always, big dog, if you want to get something in return by supporting the channel, then go to TheCaliEffect.com to get your merch today. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all, big dogs? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that's your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Rogue tier list. I want to say the criteria for this rogue tier list is incredibly simple. I'm going to be ranking these Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies based on how powerful they are. But in rogue Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies, there are slightly different outliers you have to account for as opposed to meta decks and other strategies alike. One is, what does your deck provide to be able to beat some of the best decks in the game? Two, what does your deck do to be able to beat some of the most popular cards being used? Right now, two of the best decks in the game is Yugioh Mitsurugi and Malice. You can consider this a tier 0 format of some sort. And with that also being said, some of the best cards in the game are Molchummy Floralist, Nibiru the Primal Bing, Droll, and Lockbird. Those are some of the cards you have to watch out for, and if you want your deck to be able to succeed, you're probably going to need a game plan against them. Another thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that while this is a tier list, this is based on ease of being able to beat some of the top decks. I'm not saying some of the strategies in Needs Help or Copium can't beat the top deck and overcome those circumstances. It's just incredibly hard compared to some of the other strategies. And of course, if you think that I forgot your Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategy, well, you're in luck. I do be reading the comments, so let me know down below in the comment section which strategy that I missed. And the next tier list that I plan on making is a super budget tier list. Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks that can be built in about $30. So I'm gonna need you guys' help to post down below in the comment section, not only what are some strategies that I should talk about next, but those super budget Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. I can't wait to see what you guys have to say. Let's go ahead and start off with Dragons. Now, a lot of you guys may confuse Dragons with Dragon Maid, seeing that it just got released, or more support released, in Battles of Legends Monsters Mayhem. But looking at that in Dragon Maid prices, I think it's going to be a prime candidate for the budget under 30. Dragon in totality would be pilot dependent right now. I think one of the best things that Dragons have going for it are the bestial monsters. Even with Druis Worm and Magnamut being limited to 1, the monsters like Boldrake, Cyreneer, and Lubellion to be able to get branded Regain are insane. The only problem with that situation is that the bestial monsters need to do a lot of lifting, and sometimes that doesn't really happen consistently. While Yugioh Mitsurugi and Fiendsmith cards do have that weakness to those bestial monsters, you are going to be in a really interesting spot against Malice. As well as against some other powerful Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks, you're going to need to pick up the load and actually pilot down, but still a really good Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. And to be honest with you, Centur-ion is almost in the exact same boat. One thing that I love about the Centur-ion deck is being able to use your bestial monsters to synchro summon on your opponent's turn. Now, you're not going to be getting as much value because Druis Worm is limited, so the odds of having Druis Worm are slightly lower, but being able to make Chaos Angel on the opponent's turn, as well as send an opponent's special summon monster to the graveyard, is almost worth it. It's insane. I think Centur-ion is also a pilot dependent type Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. Players should stop worrying about playing cards like Infinite Impermanence and Effect Veiler as much and start looking into more cards like Ghost Spell and Skullmeister. Trust, they're actually good Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards at the moment. If you do that alongside of the correct pilot with Centur-ion, this deck can be really good. It's a strategy that's almost immune to the Molchummy cards and Droll and Lockbird. Really tough strategy to beat at times. Now, Chimera pretty much gets hits from all sides, and I really hate to rag on this deck because I love Chimera. But as a Fiendsmith deck, there are better Fiendsmith strategies, and as an Azamina deck, there are better Azamina strategies. I feel like a broken record how many times I've said this, but I'm gonna put Chimera into Needs Help. By no means is this a bad Yu-Gi-Oh strategy, and I think it's genuinely a pilot-dependent type Yu-Gi-Oh strategy. But for the millionth time, there's almost no reason to play Chimera over playing a different Fiendsmith or Azamina Yu-Gi-Oh deck. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Gimmick Puppets, the FTK Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Bro, why would you want to do this to anybody? Gimmick Puppets are, I don't know what to say. They're actually not a bad Yu-Gi-Oh deck when they aren't trying to FTK you. Rank 8 monsters are really powerful, Photon Lord, Hope Harbinger, and then there's some other cards like Secret Grunix and even Sanafond, the Abyss Dweller for rank 8 monsters. I don't think that the deck is complete copium, but I would put it in needs help. Gimmick Puppet actually has some pretty decent word break and some tough Yu-Gi-Oh cards with the potential to FTK at the drop of a dime without the right interruption. The only problem is that I don't think that that's consistent or strong enough to be able to compete in today's Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Now, Horus Stun did get a Yu-Gi-Oh top. Bro, what are we doing? Stun, my brother? We went from talking about FTK to stun Yu-Gi-Oh decks. I don't even know what to say. The Horus monsters are actually really strong. They are easily some of the best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, and it's not even close. And the stun element can also be good. Summoning monsters like Vanities or Majesty's Fiends to your side of the field prevents your opponent from activating monster effects or special summoning. That's huge. The only problem is that when going second, you're over-reliant on the Horus engine to be able to carry you, and once your opponent figures out your one-trick pony type deck, they can easily plan for it. I would really like to say needs help with this strategy. It's not bad, it can still some really good games. It's just not the deck that I think can win consistently on the long haul. Horus actually does need to be its own Yu-Gi-Oh archetype. It has some really powerful cards like the Field Spell, which cycles cards back into the deck, and then there's the Horus level 8 monster that can send cards to the graveyard and potentially draw cards. Horus is easily a top tier engine, but as a stun Yu-Gi-Oh deck, Now if you were to play Horus in Kashtira, which actually is not that bad. Your Kashtira cards like Unicorn and Fenrir can actually get you resources to send to the graveyard with your Horus cards. They also both are really good at board breaking, with the Kashtira cards giving you the benefit of banishing cards face down. And if I'm being so real with you, Kashtira isn't just Horus, there's also Regenesis Kashtira, and so many other different variants. I think that this deck is still a really solid choice. It plays around the Molcharmy cards incredibly well because it doesn't need to special summon from the extra deck much. Droll and Lockbird is almost a non-factor against this deck if you're playing the deck correctly. And the top meta decks do have to fear losing their cards face down. This strategy is a lot stronger than what people are giving it credit. And I can almost say the exact same thing about Labrynth, one of the only Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that can use Dominus Impulse really well. Not only does it play little to no earth, wind, or light monsters inside of the deck, this strategy is actually insane with Nibiru. It plays under Nibiru by typically not summoning 5 times. Another really good thing about this is that you can even return Nibiru back into your hand with Big Welcome Labrynth. It feels like this deck is built for this format. I'm gonna go ahead and put Labrynth as a really sneaky can challenge Yu-Gi-Oh deck. This deck is easily one of the secret best rogue Yu-Gi-Oh strategies in the game right now and can actually be one of the top contenders if players use it right. It's almost a crime that a deck like Live Twin is here because this is easily another one of the top contending Yu-Gi-Oh decks. Yu-Gi-Oh is starting to recover and hand traps are starting to become really big. Cards like Schoolmeister and Ghost Spell. And what this deck does really well is that it can play forever. It has multiple ways into the Fiendsmith engine, saying that it is a light fiend accessible Yu-Gi-Oh deck itself without needing Lori. And it has the room to be able to play the cards to be able to check the top cards in the game. While Molcharmy Farwellist can be a problem, Droll and Lockbird as well as Nibiru to Primal Being are not if you play this deck correctly. It is easily one of the better decks and did win a YCS just recently. Now my favorite copium deck is Magical Musketeers. Let's go, baby! And on Master Duel, I have been playing a Magical Musketeer Bestial Fiendsmith Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I've been cooking the meta with it. Unfortunately, Yu-Gi-Oh in the TCG is not necessarily like Master Duel, but even if it were, I think that it is a needs help type Yu-Gi-Oh deck. The only thing that the Magical Musketeer monsters really have going for them is that they are light fiend monsters, but the big problem here is that getting your Magical Musketeer Starfire to get its effect to activate is pretty hard. There's not a ton of spell cards that are really useful right now to activate under a Magical Musketeer and gain its effect, unless you're talking about Upstart Goblin, which could potentially put you into the droll zone. This is also a Yu-Gi-Oh deck that has to play into Moltres Army, has to play into Nibiru Primal Being. The bestial monsters don't really work against half of the meta if played correctly. So yeah, it's 100% a Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that needs more magical musketeer support, and I'm standing on it. I've talked about Orcust quite a few times. I said that this is one of the decks that players should be concerned about, and I'm standing on business. Orcust is a Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that is incredibly good because it makes hand traps look incredibly bad. Even Moltres Army flawless, this deck can roll itself and not care. That's something you want to see from a really good Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It's also one of the very few Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that doesn't really care about getting its board wiped multiple times. It has protections from those type of things and has one of the most powerful trap cards in the game in Orcust Crescendo. That card is insane. A card that not only negates the activation of a card effect but banishes it too can really turn the tide of a Yu-Gi-Oh game. But the fact that it is a reinforcement of the army as well is over the top. Even though we don't have the data of this strategy in Europe, I think that this deck is can challenge. In fact, I think that this deck is a top 5 meta deck, but only time will tell. Plants are a Yu-Gi-Oh deck that has completely fallen off the map. It's not necessarily a terrible deck, it's just a strategy that doesn't seem like it can keep up with the current times. I'm gonna put this deck in our first Copium deck. Now, plants still do have those crazy good 1-card combos, but plants are also susceptible to so many things in the format. Ryziel Detonator pretty much solos this deck by itself, and the inboards that you make aren't necessarily bad, they're just not amazing. But I wouldn't be surprised if some plant support comes around to make the deck good again. Primite is another one of those Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that I think is really good. It being a bestial Fiendsmith deck gives you the best of both worlds, allowing you to pivot into Fiendsmith when your combos get disrupted, and also giving you some pretty good insulation from card effects with Primite Drill Beam. I think that this deck is actually incredible right now. It kind of has what dragons want. The bestial monsters are good against the strategies that it's good against, but it also has other engines allowing you to be able to operate against some of the better decks. And to be honest, if we were to put Dragon Maid in here, it would probably be pilot dependent as well. Mainly because I just remembered the deck more than likely is going to be playing bestials, which kind of takes it out of the $30 range, right? So yeah, actually this could stand for Dragon Maid. Let me actually change that. There we go, that feels a lot better. Next is Salamangreat. Salamangreat's actually been doing pretty well over the last few weeks. I think one of Salamangreat's biggest problems is that decision tree. Do you play cards that help you beat the meta, like Droll, Nib, and Ghost Bell? Or do you play Dominus Impulse? Because it's really hard to get one or the other, especially when you consider cards like Speedray Terratop are really good for the deck, allowing you to go full combo without committing your normal summon. Overall, this deck does search a trap card that can negate any card effect, although it doesn't banish it, and also make Salamangreat Pyro Phoenix to nuke your opponent's entire board. I think that this deck is pilot dependent. It's a solid Yu-Gi-Oh strategy where if you don't play correctly, Nibiru Primal Being is your inboard, but when played correctly can go against some of the greats. The downfall of Shark really needs to be studied, because even Shark Ryziel isn't as viable as a deck that it should be because Bahamut Shark is now banned. I think that Sharks are 100% Copium. This is probably one of the worst decks on the tier list. And it's really unfortunate because Sharks did have so much potential. Shark players, I'm going to need you guys' help, because I don't want to drag on your strategy. I want to know what you guys are doing in the format to make Sharks better than what I'm thinking right now. Because currently right now, I don't even see an Angle. I just see Kurt Angle. And you know what we say about Kurt Angle? You suck! Please, Shark players, say something to give me some hope. Next is Spright. When it comes to soda, Spright is #1 right beside Dr. Pepper. I'm not arguing with none of y'all, and you know it's true. When it comes to Spright, I want to put it in needs help, but I'm actually going to give it the nod. It's pilot dependent. Spright can play under most hand traps. Ash Blossom, Imperm, just about all of them. And when played correctly, you can actually play around cards like Moltres Army Flawless. This deck can make totally awesome, but the biggest problem with this deck is that it is a dated Yu-Gi-Oh strategy. This deck is not as strong as it should be, which is crazy, considering that this deck was a complete terror back in the day and didn't really lose much. Galaxy is going to be... yeah, buddy. Yeah, the jury's out. Copium. Galaxy isn't necessarily terrible. The new cards were actually really good. The problem is that those new cards play into every single counter card that players are using right now, and aren't strong enough to be able to compete against the best decks. I absolutely hate that the Galaxy cards that they even made in Battles of Legends Monsters Mayhem does make the deck stronger, but doesn't make it more consistent, doesn't give it answers to the actual problems right now. I would actually say that I was wrong about both Unchained and Yubel. They, in rogue terms, are some really solid Yu-Gi-Oh decks. The biggest problem for both of these strategies are the Molcharmy cards. But if we're being so real, Molcharmy is a problem for just about any Yu-Gi-Oh deck, even the best decks in the game, which is the reason why they're being played. The good thing about both of these decks is that they play around Droll and Nibiru pretty easily, and they can go toe-to-toe with some of the top decks in the game. They are a strategy that requires a good pilot, but they also have some really unfair things about them, like Fiendsmith. Vaalmonica got some good support. In fact, Vaalmonica has gotten a plethora of support. It's one of the very few decks that can bridge Blue Eyes and Fiendsmith together, and I'm not coping. We actually seen this happen on Master Duel. A Yu-Gi-Oh player made them work and they are efficient. You have to keep in mind, Vaalmonica Celatrice is a spellcaster Yu-Gi-Oh card that gets you an engine, but also allows you to be able to search a light fiend monster. The entire blueprint for this deck is there. But unfortunately, it's still a pendulum mechanic that relies on counters. I'm not gonna lie, you're better off playing Blue Eyes or Fiendsmith in a different Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Hell, you're probably even better off playing Blue Eyes Fiendsmith, as disgusting as it sounds. Especially if you went all the way out of your way to get all of those cards, you're really just adding an unnecessary engine right now for the deck. Possibly if Blue Eyes or Fiendsmith gets hit down the line, we can revisit this. Vanquish Soul is a tier 1 Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and it'll probably be a tier 1 Yu-Gi-Oh deck in the TCG when we get the K9 cards. But for right now, yeah, no. While Vanquish Soul Regenesis has been successful, statistically, Regenesis has just been successful overall. It's been way better as a Kashtira or a Bestial-based Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and when you take that out of the equation, you also realize that Vanquish Soul needs access to Razin desperately. Without having that in your arsenal, this is a middle-of-the-road type Yu-Gi-Oh deck that you're better off using your resources for other Yu-Gi-Oh strategies at the time. I think that White Forest is one of those Yu-Gi-Oh decks that could be really good if everybody weren't main decking its counters. I'm actually going to put it in solid choice, which sounds crazy, but hear me out. Molcharmy, Droll, Nib, going second. Those are some of this deck's biggest problems, but despite all of that, it is a consistent regional topper and regional winner. Just when you get to the big stages, the deck tends to struggle because of what I just said before. I think this is one of those really potential meta Yu-Gi-Oh decks when the format changes into its favor. But for right now, it's definitely struggling because of the cards that are being used against it. ABC or A to Z did top. Great. I would be really doubtful of a player being able to replicate that success on a consistent basis. This deck is a walking litany of bricks. Hey, being able to summon ABC Buster Dragon and the other new Buster Dragon kind of crazy though, I ain't gonna lie, it's cool. Now for Dinos, I gotta say, I was wrong about them. In my Battles of Legends Monsters Mayhem video, I said that Dirac Dino was infinitely the better version of Dino. Then I started to realize that the Dirac version, while a little bit more consistent, playing less bricks, doesn't really have a turn 2, 3, or 4. You kind of just Dirac Meteor the board and pray. Right now, as it stands, I think that Dinos are better off as a more mixed deck. It makes the strategy explosive and gives it its own first turn board instead of having to go for these weird inboards with these outlier Yu-Gi-Oh cards, like back when we used to make Borreload Savage Dragon Appaloosa. But the deck does have its fair share of problems, like being able to manage your bricks. Really got to do that in the deck building process. Drytron is, like, it's not bad. I would put Drytron in needs help. I don't think Drytron is terrible. The correlation of Drytron being good has to do with players playing graveyard-reliant cards like Bestial, Ghost Bell, Skullmeister, which are being played right now, and this deck's ability to be able to establish boards. It's a deck that does suffer from Droll and Lockbird, but can play around Charmy and Nibiru to Primal Being when played correctly. Keep in mind, this deck can be a stun-like Yu-Gi-Oh deck, searching and summoning Vanity's Ruler to the side of the field. And then there's also the Draco Overlord lock where you skip your opponent's main phase 1. It's a deck that just needs a little bit more direction from my perspective. I think that Exodia was a really good stun deck too, and I mean, I think we're starting to see where the stun decks get you. Secret Village of Spellcasters with the Exodia Fusion monster is really annoying to deal with. But the problem here is that it's annoying, not necessarily impossible to deal with. Considering that Exodia doesn't even negate monster effects, it's almost redundant to have Secret Village. And your stun cards like Macrocosmos may work in Master Duel, but they're not that great here. Madolche has been, unfortunately, an utter mess. It's 100% copium at this time. I actually like the Madolche support that it received a year ago. It seemed really solid. But Madolche struggles against some of the top decks in the game, and I think it's simply because those decks are overpowered, where Madolche is a lot more fair. P.U.N.K, from my perspective, is easily a Yu-Gi-Oh strategy that can challenge. I think this is one of the best Yu-Gi-Oh strategies to incorporate Fiendsmith, Horus, or both of them inside of this deck. And because of the new level 8 monster and the rank 8 monster, it gives you insulation from cards like Nibiru to Primal Being and another play line to play around cards like Droll and Logburn. The deck is really solid. The best cards from Rescue Ace are like Rescue Ace Impulse and the Rescue Ace, the one that lets you draw 2 cards, I forget, the Fire Attacker, I think. Outside of that, this deck is really struggle bus. It is one disruptive card away from just ending its turn, which is really unfortunate because it can be a powerful deck in the game if you can consistently resolve Turbulence. Tearlament is back in Yu-Gi-Oh! Great. It topped a major Yu-Gi-Oh! Event, and I think that a Tearlament Horus Fiendsmith deck is one of the... Why are we still talking about this deck in 2025? Let it die, please. Doesn't care about Droll, has insulation from Nibiru. It's a deck. And lastly is Regenesis. I think Regenesis is either solid choice or can challenge. I'm gonna put it in solid choice. And if it is at solid choice, I think it's at the top of solid choice. We're waiting for better Regenesis cards. And what I mean by that is I mean that we are waiting for more Regenesis cards. Regenesis Birth feels like an FTK at times. A contiguous Book of Moon that gets you into engine, it's crazy good. The only problem with Regenesis is having your cards disrupted on your turn and sometimes not providing enough presence on the opponents. Overall, that's remedied between Kashtira and Bestial monsters, but I'm really excited to see what the players are going to figure out to make this deck even stronger. But that's all that I have for the Rogue tier list for this month. Again, big dogs, I will be making that super budget tier list very soon, so let me know down below in the comment section some other strategies that need to be included. Also, pick up your bats from TheCaliEffect.com. Brother man, this is back. And be sure to check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.